Hi everyone, this is Helloangel.design. Today I'm going to show you how to make this cute, beautiful dress. It's a 4-corner neckline and it has a belt. The belt you can tie it at the back or at the front. As you can see, I tie mine at the front. And this dress has a pocket on the side seam of the dress. If you are making this kind of dress, I would recommend that you should use a different fabric for the pocket so that the beauty of this dress is more visible. And the dress has an invisible zip at the center back. In my previous video, I have shown how to stitch invisible zip on the center back. If you have not watched that tutorial, I'll put the link on my description box so that you can go and check it out. So this is how it is once you have done making your own dress. I will take you step by step on how you can achieve this dressmaking. Please, if you have not subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. Turn on your notification bell button and select all options. If my tutorial is helpful, thumbs up, make a comment down below. If you're just stopping by, before you exit that video, don't forget to subscribe, and let's get started. First thing that you have to do, you're going to pin your pattern paper on your fabric. This pattern paper is for 4 years old child. And you can see that my neckline is different. My neckline is a 4-corner neckline. You can make yours round neckline, 4-corner neckline, V neckline. That totally depends on you. So I just pin my pattern paper on my fabric. Before I cut it out, I will add 1 centimeter around the neckline, the shoulder, armhole, side seam, and at the bottom edge. If you're using 1/2 inch, add 1/2 inch at the neckline, shoulder, armhole, side seam, and at the bottom edge. My front neckline is 3 inch. I just measured down 3 inch deeper. And my back neckline is 1 inch. I measured down 1 inch deeper for the back neckline. You can make your back neckline even deeper, or you can even make your front neckline deeper. Depends on how you want the neckline of your dress to look. So go ahead and cut your front top that you're making, and also cut the lining. I have pinned my back pattern paper on my fabric. I add 1 centimeter seam allowance on the neckline, shoulder, armhole, side seam, and at the bottom edge. And I add 2 centimeter seam allowance at the center back. So you can either add 1/2 inch, 1 inch, that totally depends on you, but I add 2 centimeter seam allowance at the center back, and the rest is 1 centimeter seam allowance. I will just take my scissors and then go ahead and cut it out. When you're cutting your back pattern paper, you're going to cut 2 pieces, not just 1. You also do the same thing with your lining. The next thing that you have to do, you're going to cut your pocket. This dress that we are making today, we are going to attach a pocket at the side seam of the dress. So the length of my pocket, 5.5 inch. The width is 6.5 inch. You just go ahead, place it on your fabric. I have 2 pieces of fabric right here. For the top right here, because I'm going to fold it and then fold it again and top stitch, this is 1 inch. For the side, I add 1 centimeter seam allowance. From the bottom, I add 1 centimeter seam allowance. You just go ahead and cut it out. I have cut out my fabric. So this is how it is. I cut 2 pieces for the pocket. And this is my back top dress. I cut 2 pieces for the main fabric, 2 pieces for the lining. And this is my front top dress, the main fabric and the lining. And for this dress that we're making today, I'm going to attach a belt at the side seam so that the child can tie it at the back. So the length of my belt right here is 21.5 inch. So I don't have enough fabric. That is why I cut 21.5 inch. If you have enough fabric, you can cut 23 or 24 inch by length. And the width is 4 inch. So I cut 2 pieces right here. This is my skirt, 1 for the front, 2 for the back skirt. I will take a measurement for you guys to see. The length of my skirt is 12 inches. I want the skirt to be at the knee level, so I don't have too much fabric. So that is why I have only 12 inches. But if you have enough fabric, you're going to cut the length of your skirt 13 inch or 14 inches. So this is how I cut my fabric right here. Let's start put the dress together. First thing that you have to do, you take your front top, this is the front of my top, and you take the back pieces. Make sure both front fabric are facing each other. You put the both shoulder seam together like this. You go ahead and stitch the both shoulder seam with 1 centimeter seam allowance. If you're using half an inch, also do the same thing, half an inch seam allowance. And you take your lining, this is the front of my lining. You're going to put the both shoulder seam together. Once you have done that, take it to your sewing machine, stitch the both shoulder seam with 1 centimeter seam allowance or half an inch seam allowance, depending on the seam allowance you add on your fabric when you're cutting them out. So go ahead and top stitch. I have stitched the both shoulder seam of my top together, and I did the same thing with my lining. This is how it looks right now. The next thing that you have to do, you're going to put your lining on top of your made fabric. Make sure that both front fabric are facing each other. You are going to pin around the both armhole and the neckline. Remember your 2 centimeter seam allowance from the center back. Take your measuring tape and your marker, measure inside 2 centimeter seam allowance and continue pinning all the way around your neckline, and then you end before the 2 centimeter seam allowance. Depends on the seam allowance that you add on your fabric when cutting them out. Go ahead and pin it all around. I have pinned around the both armhole and the neckline. The next thing that you have to do, take it to your sewing machine, stitch around the both armhole with 1 centimeter seam allowance, stitch around the neckline with 1 centimeter seam allowance. I place a different pin right here. This is where I'm going to start stitching all the way, and I will end on this other side of the pin. Once you have done stitching, make sure to trim a little bit out from your seam allowance. Snip around the curved edge, especially these 4 corners. Snip it all the way down, and I will show you how to do that later. So once you have done stitching your top dress, take your bed to your sewing machine. You just fold it into 2. This is the front side of my fabric. I fold it into 2. You just go ahead and give it a top stitch all the way down. Before you get to the end of your fabric, you can use your marker to mark that. Draw a diagonal, and you just stitch it all the way down to that point. Trim a little bit out from your seam allowance. Turn it inside out and give it a good press. You also repeat the same process on this other one. I have stitched around the neckline and the both armhole. So when you're going to snip your fabric around the neckline, you can see this corner. Make sure you snip it very close to your stitch thread, but don't snip your stitch thread very close like this. Very close to your stitch thread. You just go ahead and do the same thing all around the neckline. Once you have done that, take it to an ironing board and give it a good press. I take it to my ironing board, I turn it inside out, give it a good press. This is how it looks. You can see how the top dress looks. Then you take your bed, also do the same thing. Turn it inside out, go ahead and give it a good press. This is how it finally looks. The next thing that we have to do, we are going to stitch our bed on the side seam of this top. So what you're going to do, you push your lining, make sure to separate your lining. You take your marker and your ruler, From the waistline, you measure inside 1 centimeter. If you add half an inch on your waistline, also go ahead and measure inside half an inch. So mine is 1 centimeter. You just mark right here 1 centimeter. And you do the same thing on the other side. Measure inside 1 centimeter. Once you have done that, the next thing that you have to do, you take your belt, place it like this. This is my 1 centimeter. This is where I'm going to attach my skirt. Take your pin, secure the belt. You just pin it in place. And then you come down to this other side. You repeat the same process. Place your belt like this. You just go ahead and secure that with a pin. So once you have pin your belt in place, take it to your sewing machine. Just go ahead and stitch it in place. Once you have done that, take your skirt to your sewing machine, set it to the longest stitch. You just stitch along the top edge of your skirt. You also do the same thing with the front pieces of your skirt. Go ahead and stitch along the top edge of your skirt. So go ahead and stitch them in place. I have stitched my belt in place. This is how it is. You just give it a top stitch. This is how it looks right now. The next thing that you have to do, you take your skirt. This is my skirt. We are going to gather our skirt at the waistline of this top right here. So what you're going to do, you make sure that both front fabric are facing each other. You pick your dress, you just turn it over. I have already gathered the back skirt. Put both side seam and the side seam of your top together like this. You go ahead and pin that in place. And then you pick the other side seam of your skirt, side seam of your top, put them together, pin that in place. So what we are going to do, we are going to gather this skirt. I'll pick my thread and I will use it to secure the pin like this first, and then I will come to this other side and I will start pulling my skirt all around. This is how I gather my skirt. I don't gather my skirt then pin it on the waistline of my top. This is how I normally gather my skirt. I don't do it the other way around. So go ahead and gather your skirt, and you also do the same thing with your back skirt. I have pinned my skirt all around. This is how it is. I have also pinned the back skirt all around. This is how it is. And you can see that we haven't stitched the side seam of this dress yet, because I want to stitch the gathered skirt before we put the side seam together and stitch it in place. So what you're going to do, once you have pinned your skirt together, this is my back skirt, just go ahead and give it a top stitch all the way down, 1 centimeter seam allowance. And you also repeat the same process with your front skirt. Go ahead and give it a top stitch with 1 centimeter seam allowance. Once you have done that, remove all your gather stitch thread, trim a little bit out from the seam allowance, take it to your overlocker, overlock the raw edges, or use zigzag to overlock the raw edges. Go ahead and stitch your skirt together. I have stitched my skirt together. This is how it is. This is how it looks. I use my zigzag stitches to overlock the raw edges. The next thing that you have to do is to put the side seam together. You just pick your dress, put them together like this. Just go ahead and pin the side seam all the way down. You repeat the same process on the other side of the side seam. I have pinned the side seam together. Take it to your sewing machine, stitch the side seam with 1 centimeter seam allowance. Once you have done that, you can also take it to your overlocker, overlock the raw edges, or use zigzag to overlock the raw edges. Once you have done that, you take your pocket. This is my pocket. Fold inside 1 centimeter, overlock the raw edge with your zigzag stitches or overlocker sewing machine. For the top of the pocket, fold inside 0.5 and then fold it again. Take it to your sewing machine. Just go ahead and give it a top stitch all the way down. So go ahead and stitch the side seam of your top dress and also stitch your pocket in place. The next thing that we are going to do, we are going to stitch our zipper at the center back. Before you stitch your zipper at the center back, remember to take your measuring tape and measure where you want your zipper to end. Open your zipper, pin it all the way around, and you do the same thing on this side. Once you have done that, remember to always thread your needle, use hand stitch to stitch it in place. Then remove all the pins and take your dress to your sewing machine and just stitch your zipper all around. In my previous video, I have shown how to pin your invisible zipper at the center back, and I've also shown how to use hand stitch to stitch it first before taking it to your sewing machine and stitch. For this tutorial, I'm not going to show that. I will just take my dress to my sewing machine and show you how to stitch your invisible zipper at the center back. I have stitched my invisible zipper. This is how it is. The next thing that you have to do, you just go ahead and zip your dress all the way down like this. You can see that my waistline is matched. So I will just go ahead and open my zipper. The next thing that you have to do, once you have stitched your zipper, you pick your lining. We are going to use our lining to cover the raw edges of our zipper. You turn your lining over like this. You're just going to pull them together and go ahead and pin it all the way down. I have pinned it in place. When you get to the waistline of your dress, you fold inside 1 centimeter. You fold it inside like this, 1 centimeter, because we are going to use it to cover the raw edges of our waistline. So once you've done that, just go ahead and secure that with a pin. The next thing that you have to do, take it to your sewing machine. This is the neckline of our dress. Take it to your sewing machine, stitch it across all the way down, and just go ahead and stitch it all the way down. So you're using your lining to cover the raw edges. Once you have done that, you also go ahead and repeat the same process on this other side. I have used my lining to cover the raw edges of my zipper. This is how it is. And my lining, I fold inside 1 centimeter and I take it to my ironing board. You can see that I just iron them in place. So I'm going to top stitch around the waistline. Before I take it to my sewing machine, I will pin it all in place and then I will go ahead and top stitch around the waistline. If you have a belt on your dress, all you have to do, you're going to top stitch from here to here. Make sure to back stitch, and you back stitch at the beginning, back stitch at the end. Because of the belt right here, you can stitch it across. You also come to this side, you repeat the same process from here to the end of the side seam, back stitch at the beginning, back stitch at the end. Because of the belt right here, you cannot stitch across. And then you go ahead, you continue from the front waistline, you just go ahead and stitch it across. So once you have done that, also go ahead and finish the center back of your dress. You just go ahead, zip your dress, turn your dress inside out like this. So you just put your skirt together, go ahead, continue from your stitches. You just stitch it all the way to the end. So I have stitched the center back of my dress. This is how it finally looks. I will just open it. This is how it is. And I've also stitched the waistline. And I've used my lining to cover the raw edges of the waistline. This is how it is right now. and this is how the inside look. I use zigzag to overlock all the raw edges, and I use that opportunity to just hem my dress all around. The next thing that you have to do is to stitch your pocket on the dress. You can decide not to stitch your pocket on this dress, you just hem your dress, it looks really beautiful. But if you want to stitch your pocket on your dress, you turn your dress like this. This is the side seam of our dress. What you're going to do, take your dress to your ironing board, fold it into two so that you have a crease in between the pocket. What you are going to do, you are going to place it at the side seam of your dress. You're going to pin it from the very bottom edge of the dress. You secure that with a pin. You just go ahead and pin it all together. I have pinned my pocket together. The next thing that you have to do, take it to your sewing machine. Just go ahead and give it a top stitch all the way down. For the side seam, you can give it a double stitches. You're not stitching the top anymore because we have already stitched that. So you're just stitching from this side at the bottom and on the other side. You also go ahead and pin the second pocket on the other side and just repeat the same process. So go ahead and stitch your pocket in place.